Death is such a strange thing, isn't it? You know, it happens to everyone. No matter what you do in life, you're gonna die. I hate to break it to you, spoilers. But it's funny because we don't think about it too often. I mean, sure, some people do. You know, there's that certain person who obsesses about it all day long. But for the most part, human beings are able to go on with their lives, forgetting about death. It's rather easy for most of us. We care more about what food we're gonna eat that day than if we're gonna live or die, which is awesome. You know, it's good not to focus on that. It's gonna drive you crazy. Every time I have in my life, I can tell you, it just kind of makes you wacky. So, art has a great way of making us connect with things that we don't often think about or maybe appreciate enough, and that is living, or sometimes appreciate the fact that we die, and that life is a beautiful thing because there's an ending to it, in some way. Instead of thinking about the ending so much, you think about the journey, obviously. But sometimes art really makes us go into a different place where it makes you uncomfortable and gives you this underwater feeling where there's the strangeness to life when you feel a little disconnected, when you feel a little off. And one of my favorite movies that actually captures a certain kind of odd feeling that I can relate to at certain parts of my life, and I don't think is explored in too many movies, and not necessarily in American cinema, is in Peter Weir's 1993 underrated classic, Fearless, starring Jeff Bridges. Now, a lot of people talk about this film as an underrated classic, and there's a good reason for that. The film only made $7 million at the box office, despite a lot of really rave reviews. And Peter Weir, coming off the hit movie Dead Poet Society, Jeff Bridges was a big actor. Really, this had the makings for being a hit. And you figured it would get a lot of Academy Award nominations, but it only got one for Rosie Perez's supporting performance. But now we look back on it, and we realized that it was one of the best films of the 90s, quite frankly, as far as I'm concerned, too. The writer was influenced by his book, and he wrote the screenplay, Surviving a Car Accident. And here's the thing about this movie. There's the premise of Fearless. Jeff Bridges plays a guy named Max. He's an architect. He's on a trip in a plane. But at the beginning of the movie, we see he survived a plane crash. That's just the beginning of it. It's no big deal. Well, it is a big deal, but you kind of don't feel too much about it. You're like, oh, okay, that's what this movie's about. What's so wonderful about this movie is the structure it takes after that. It starts with something very big happening in the aftermath of it. You know, you're like, okay, this is after it happened. But then we follow Max, who's getting a huge settlement now, millions of dollars. His partner died in the plane crash. He has to go talk to the wife. He has to reconnect with his family and his son. He helped a little boy on the plane, apparently. He's considered a hero. Only a few people survived. It's a big deal. And he says, the pilot's the hero. As the movie goes on, you start to realize, and even early on, that Max just seems disconnected. He doesn't seem like he fits in anymore. It's almost like part of him did die on the plane crash, or he's being possessed by something else. He doesn't feel quite human anymore. He goes and talks to other survivors, and eventually he makes friends with Rosie Perez's character, who lost her baby on the plane. And she's having a tough time with her marriage, which I believe her husband's actually Benicio del Toro, if I remember right, which actually is pretty cool. But her marriage is having a rough time. They're not being able to deal with the loss of a child, which is, perfectly fine. And Jeff Bridges and her kind of form a bond, almost a romantic one, about dealing with the fact that they really don't care the way people want them to care. They don't know what to say or feel. They go by presents for her kid. They hang out together, and then somehow she's able to kind of reconnect again. I don't know. It's a movie about this feeling you can get after the premise basically is he survives this tragedy, and then he really doesn't feel alive anymore. He's having this experience afterwards where he's really it's not really PTSD. He's just like because he's not like triggered by it. I mean, he kind of gets freaked out. He definitely can't deal with it totally, but it's almost spiritual, the way it's set up. And making him an architect's kind of interesting. He's a guy that deals with the physical world and designing things, but yet he dealt with something he couldn't control. Because plane crashes they're not that common. It's very safe to travel on planes and stuff like that. So it happening like that was pretty crazy for him. And it's like he doesn't know how to live anymore. He doesn't know how to talk to his family, how to kiss his wife, how to smile, how to be happy. He has just weird moments. It's a very off-kilter performance from Bridges, and one of his absolute best. You see him as this character, not as Jeff Bridges. and it's like a transcendence. It's one of those kind of movies that tries to make you see the world in a different way. And that it is weird how perspective works that way. Sometimes you can look out the car window when you're driving through a state you've never been to, and your idea of that area you're in, it's not really that place necessarily, but it's what you feel at the time. But if you live there, you might feel differently. It's weird how climate affects us. It's weird how the places around us affect us, the environment we're in. It all matters so much, the physical world, yet we're always trying to reach for something more, something deeper. Well, Max seems to me always that he can't handle the fact that there was nothing deeper. He comes to peace with death. You come to find is that he is all right with death. He accepts it, and I think almost because he accepted death, it's hard to be alive because when you no longer have that fear, you just kind of are going to wander like anything else. You're just another creature in nature. You're an animal fully at that point. The being aware as a human being seems to be missing from him. He doesn't care so much. I won't spoil the ending, but I'll say this. If you had to rank top movie endings ever, like a top 100, I don't know how anyone could have a list and not include Fearless. Peter Weir does some of his best direction in the final stretch of this movie, the final 5 minutes. And like I said, I won't spoil it, but I'll just say the use of music, imagery, this montage of a sequence that it really brings the whole movie together. It's one of those movies that's a slow burn. It's not quickly paced. You kind of have to be patient with it. But it's a slow burn for a couple hours, and then it's really rewarding. And the reward is totally worth the wait. If you're not completely emotionally invested and it just broke down and honestly feel a new appreciation for things, your own life at the end of this movie, I don't know why you watch movies. This is Powerful Sinner. Peter Weir's a brilliant director that's made several masterpieces and great films. This is another one that's not looked at enough. People do not talk about this film enough, analyze it. There's a lot of things in the dialogue, the approach of the characters here, the pitch of the movie, that all deserve a lot of analysis that I think people really need to go back and look at. Beautifully shot. Gorgeous movie, by the way. Lee Smith worked on this years ago, which is interesting. Very popular editor now. One of the best movies of the 90s, one of Jeff Bridges' best performances. And I love how this movie is just saying that death is always it's on the edge of happening. It could be in the blink of an eye. You could get hit by a drunk driver. You could die in a plane crash. You could have a heart attack. It's always there. And it sort of reminds me of this film, God, what's a Grand Canyon by Lawrence Kasdan, where it's about someone changing. This guy survives this incident, forms a bond with another guy, and it kind of makes him change. And that was based off Lawrence Kasdan's experience of somebody saving him from getting hit by a bus. Well, a lot of people say they're going to change when they have a experience. They say, "Well, I'm going to do things differently," and they really don't. Not being judgmental, it's just the way of human beings. But in this movie, it kind of says maybe you can change and get a little deeper and get a little bit more introspective and find things out about yourself that you didn't know and meet new people and maybe not see the world in such a simplistic way but in a very beautiful way, I guess, and love. And it really is it's like meditation. I think this movie finds a peaceful calmness in death, but also doesn't forget the bittersweet sadness of letting go of the existence that you've worked so hard to build. It doesn't forget that death's an important thing, but it argues, I think, at the end, Fearless says that life is actually still more important than anything else, because being alive, it turns out, when you look at it from a very outside, objective point of view, is a really wonderful, spontaneous, beautiful thing that we take for granted too much. And to think too much about your death really is kind of not what the focus of things should be. It should be, and he stands on the top of a building. He doesn't care. He's fearless, right? He doesn't care about death anymore. He's just trying to feel alive again. He's gonna run a car into a wall, right? That's what it is. It's when you let go of everything, is there any value to it anymore? Can you hold on to anything? But there is things worth holding on to. There are human connections. I think themes in this movie were explored in the show 6 Feet Under a few years later. It reminds me of that show a lot, but I just can't recommend it more. Great movie. Just a really almost perfect little gem. Maybe a little too long, but that's a minor complaint. And I would say, yeah, just the mood this movie puts you in. It's not the happiest thing you're going to watch, but I will say that it's rewarding in the same way that a life changing experience is. You know, it's going to be a weird feeling. There's an indifference to certain things that happen that you think are going to be important, and they're not as important. Yet minor things can become major things. I don't know. Maybe I'm just going on too much about it, reading into it too much. But underrated classics. Peter Weir's Fearless, and one of the best endings I've ever seen to a movie. And just a great film, and I don't know why people don't talk about it more. People know about it, kind of, and I know Nostalgia Critic talked about it before, but yeah, it's great. I mean, really, it's great. I wish it would have made more money. I wish it would have got more love. It's really a special movie. And also Wings of Desire. It kind of reminded me of too. But thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe.
You can't do it. You want to kill me, but you can't.